It's Kyle's least favorite time of the year. Episode 12 of the 1867 show is hot and ready to roll right now. Mr. Skinner, what's going on, brother?
Well, you know what? My confidence coming into this episode is a little shaken right now, and I'll tell you why. Obviously, the Dine Sports YouTube page, where all of these episodes are housed, starting to notice a bit of a trend here, which is
Shameless plug. Shameless plug.
shameless plug. Absolutely. If you're not going to promote yourself, who the hell is? But we've quickly realized that with two videos that we've put out here, one was your lovely voiceover, one was my voiceover, and they've taken off like gangbusters. The ones where we're appearing in them are all of a sudden they're doing all right, but I'm starting to think it's our faces.
So, anyways, we're going to record the rest
Yeah.
of our episodes like this, and you're welcome.
Yeah, so I think we need to just paper bag ourselves to come onto air here because people like the sounds of our voice, but apparently it's the package we're putting out there that is turning viewers away.
I really don't care to be honest. If you're going to listen, if you're going to watch, pay attention to my face or don't. I really don't give a shit. So my
Listen,
ego is good, man. My
yeah,
ego's good.
yeah. Well, you know what? We kind of figured that modeling was never in the cards for us there, anyways. So I'll bounce back pretty quickly there, but quite
There
the
you go.
trend.
Hey, you know what? If there's one trend that is positive, then let's just roll with it.
Yeah.
If it's one or the other, we'll go with it. But
A view's a
anyways,
view, a listen's a listen. We'll take them however we can
exactly.
get them, buddy.
And speaking of that, if you are listening to this and you haven't subscribed yet, go hit the subscribe button now. We are 27 subscribes away from 1,000. We want this to happen by next week. Go do it now.
And
Stop.
now we
Stop
will
listening.
have 5
Go
seconds
subscribe.
of dead air so that you can go out and do that. And then we will return to our regularly scheduled program.
I'll give you a topic.
Yeah.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah. Well, crazy crazy happenings in Toronto these days, which is
Buddy.
turning into the gambling conspiracy mecca of Canada all of a sudden now.
And like it couldn't have happened to like a less prominent player on a team. Because I mean, anybody who's read the news or watched TV today has seen the Jontay Porter story of potential point shaving, potential bet altering while he's in the game. So basically, the story goes, Mr. Porter, when you look at his prop lines, would say he's the over under for his rebounds is 3.5, which means that if he gets 3 or less, that's the under. If he gets 4 or more, that's the over. For those of you who aren't degenerates and don't know how gambling works. Now, what's
For
been
the rest of
happening
our 99% of the audience listening.
for the rest of us who have literally gone down that rabbit hole as soon as it became legalized, you know exactly what we're talking about. But what has happened is people have been noticing a trend with him lately. He's been taking himself out of games
Yeah.
quite frequently with different ailments. One of them was an ankle issue. The next one was an eye issue. The next one was, I think
And
the
there was
third
an
one was like,
illness, a
then there was
mystery
an illness.
illness
Yeah,
was
a
the
mystery
most recent
illness.
one. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's been 4 or 5 games this year where Jontay Porter has taken himself out of games that he's been playing in. So he's registered as an active player, which means that as soon as the bet's locked in, that's good. If he doesn't dress or doesn't play or is scratched right before tip off, that bet becomes void.
Mm-hmm.
So the importance here is if he is scheduled to hit 1-3 or 0-3s, and he doesn't hit those threes because he takes himself out of a game, well, maybe that betting line is going to be altered a little bit. So again, the thought is that he could be more involved than what meets the eye here, and I think that this can't be the only player that would be going down this rabbit hole, especially given the prominence of betting in sports today.
Yeah. So again, you have to kind of look at it through the lens of what kind of a player Jontay Porter really is, right? He's on a two-way contract right now. He would not be an NBA player if not for the rash of injuries that the Raptors are currently dealing with, right? So he's kind of there out of necessity at this point. Now, he's being
The bare
investigated
necessities.
for the bare necessities. But he's being investigated for these betting irregularities, is what the NBA is kind of
Right. Yes, the fancy term.
labeling it as. But really, it is coming down to these questionable removal from games, right? Re-aggravating an eye injury. You're fine and shoot around, and then a mystery illness. Like, this isn't, the flu game. Was he food poisoned in Salt Lake City there?
Yeah.
Like it was in the 90s with Jordan and the Bulls. So, you've got a fringe player. He's a backup center to begin with. He's on a two-way contract. But all of that is important context to know, because his current contract, like, he's making somewhere in the neighborhood right now of about 400K. Again, to the average Joe, that's doing pretty good, right? To an NBA,
I mean, he does live in Toronto, so that's probably that's probably like mid range. That's like blue collar type of wages there.
Yeah. So, but compared to the average NBA salary, which is $12 million, right?
Yeah.
Forget the $60 million a year that some of them are making right now. 12 million is the average. That's a pretty big discrepancy, right? So 400K, to give you a little bit of an idea here, it's less than the league minimum for a rookie, right? Because he is on this two-way contract. He's a call up. He's an emergency player. So the reason this is important is because you'll never see LeBron or Jaylen Brown, who's currently one of the highest paid players in the league, questionable contract aside, that's something for a different day. But still, you'll never see someone like that embroiled into it, because
unless you're Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah. Well, again, there's so many. How tinfoil hat do we want to get in this episode here with the betting right now, my friend?
All right, focus. Jontay Porter, go.
Yeah. But you'll never see them embroiled in it because the stakes are too high. You're not going to put a $60 million a year contract on the line for that, because there's limits to those prop bets, and it's usually between $1,000 and $2,000, right?
Yeah.
But on January 26th and March 20th, so the eyeball and the mystery illness injury, all these betting sites, I think athletes think that, like, it's just Fred and Frick and these morons running these sites, like a lot of sophisticated software in there. So when all of a sudden the morning after report comes out and it's, hey, Jontay Porter's unders were the most profitable hammered bet of the night twice now, right? Like, I don't know. Doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure out, like, think something's a little bit afoot here.
Yeah, that's not regular. But no, it's a good point by you, because obviously this is something that I think has been opened with Pandora's box of gambling being legalized in sports now.
Yeah.
How many players have been doing this since they started doing it, right?
No.
I mean, I look at a minimum player like a Jontay Porter. There's a potential for him to make pretty good money on the side if he's got 10, 20, 30, 100 different people who are placing bets directly on him with his knowledge, right? And he can have a direct impact on that. Now, the thing that I think is most concerning about this type of thing is you look at how much betting is being just pumped into our faces during every single sporting event, whether it's live, whether it's watching on TV. Every 30 seconds, you see a betting commercial or an advertisement or something along those lines. I don't think people realize how much of an addiction gambling really is.
Yeah.
Right? Because you mentioned that, you've got the LeBrons and Steph Curry's, like, they're never going to be involved, in these types of rings, because what's the risk, right? It's way too high for them. But even for a guy making $400,000, this is the same type of thing where I think we ran into during, the 1930s and 40s when prohibition came in and people weren't allowed to drink. And then all of a sudden, alcohol came rushing back and it was legalized again. How much do you think that affected professional sports at that time?
Mhm.
It's huge, right? Look at when marijuana was legalized. That's a huge, impactful event in sports history because a lot of people use that for recreational use. A lot of people use it for pain medication,
Mhm.
right? Now, you can abuse those things, right? There's a reason why alcohol and cannabis, there are laws, that prohibit the excessive use of these types of things because people develop these addictions. Gambling doesn't really have much outside of, well, there's Gamblers Anonymous, and oh, there's that little fine print thing when you log into Betway, the Betway app on your phone. Are you fit to play? Set a limit for yourself and make sure that you're looking out for number one. Well, guess what, guys? You can easily go in and alter that each and every time you want, and you can create multiple accounts.
Yeah.
Like, so the thing that I think people don't really understand is gambling is probably the most addicting thing going right now.
Mhm.
And the fact that it's available to everybody who's of legal age, and even, let's be honest, those who are even underage, you can get away with betting on someone's behalf. You can get away with taking someone's money and placing a bet for them. So there are so many ways that go around this that your gambling addiction can be satisfied. And that's the big problem because Jontay Porter is the only one who's being targeted right now because he was obviously not being very careful with the way that he did it. But I would place a wager, no pun intended, that there's probably a good 20% of the league that's probably doing the exact same thing as Jontay Porter's doing right
Well, you have to look at it too. Like this isn't a recent phenomenon. Like even when betting wasn't legalized, like the college point shaving scandals that were going on south of the border all the time, right?
now. Yeah,
So it's very much always going to be part of sports. And there's always going to be a portion of whether you're a professional athlete or the collegiate ranks or amateur athlete trying to turn pro, whatever it is, that is going to be partaking in that because they view it as an opportunity to have put a thumb on the scale, so to speak, when they're placing these wagers, right?
yeah,
And you look at it through Jontay Porter's frame of view here, and this isn't excusing it at all, and it's not even saying that he's done anything wrong because investigation's still going, right? Hey, don't sue us,
sure.
we're not saying you're guilty, but
No,
like his brother is Michael Porter Jr. of the Denver Nuggets, who signed a max extension as soon as he was eligible and is making over $100 million in career earnings right now, just won an NBA championship, and he is making less than the last selected rookie in the second round of this year's draft. So you
right.
can kind of see where he might be inclined to, I can pad, my bank account a little bit more. It's always going to be a temptation, and it's not being done any favors by the fact that every single league, this isn't just a basketball problem. NHL, CFL, NFL, like you get to halftime, they're giving you the live updates. You get,
Yeah,
the tickers along the bottoms. Here's the live bet props, DraftKings, FanDuel, they're sponsoring everything they can slap a logo on. So, these young impressionable males, whether you're an athlete or just a fan of the game, are just getting hammered by it. Not to mention the fact that your phones are listening to you all the time as well too. So all the pop-up ads are here, click this button and you'll
they're
install the free
targeted.
app and away you go, right? So
Yeah,
it's definitely now coming to a head, and I think it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. In all
yeah,
honesty, I think you're going to see quite a few leagues, like we just hear in Ottawa. Shane Pinto got suspended half the season because he wasn't aware of what are the fine print, the do's, the don'ts, just things that are common sense to a veteran player. But when you're 19,
yeah,
20, 21 years old coming into the league making good money, and all your buddies are probably very active into that, like, oh hey, yeah, make sure you get 5 hits tonight there, and I'll bet the over on it. Like it's very easy to get sucked into it. So it's a
yeah,
problem that the leagues have created, but it's not going anywhere because not a single one of these leagues are going to walk away from the 8, 9 figure deals that they've signed with these sports books at this point.
yeah. I mean, to be perfectly honest, gambling's a rush.
Yeah.
That's why it's addictive, right? People chase the high of winning a bet.
It's a
People
lock,
want,
Jerry. It's a
yeah,
lock. Kramer,
his
you've had
mother,
this under control for a while
yeah,
now.
his mother was a mother.
Yeah.
But but that's the reason why gambling's not going away. Because, like you mentioned before, even before it was really as prominent as it is now and legalized, I mean, you hear the stories all the time of, players betting $1,000 a hand on little card games on the plane,
Yeah.
right? Like Michael Jordan taking out his teammates and his competition to golf before the game, and every hole is worth $5,000 or whatever it is, right? So,
Michael Jordan never
no,
found an activity that he couldn't place a wager on. Let's just put it
but
that way.
that's the gambling is the ultimate competition, and I think that's why a lot of athletes are drawn towards it, because they have that natural instinct of competitiveness,
Mm-hmm.
right? So 100%, I think that as long as the checks keep getting signed, as long as the leagues are getting fed, as long as it's out of sight, out of mind to the general public, everything's going to be hunky dory and going the exact same way that it has been going. But like you were saying, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And I think if you were to talk to some, experts or professionals or professors in the field of, gambling, sports gambling, and kind of understand the psychology behind it, that there are so many other extenuating factors that we're not even considering
Yeah.
that could be a huge downfall for, the partnership between gambling and sports long term. But until that happens, I mean, obviously this is something that is good for the economics of every league. It's good for the economics of, governments, and you know as we know, as long as the money's flowing, people tend to look the other way on a
Yeah.
lot of things.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Shane Pinto gets suspended for half the season, and then his first practice back has to put on a helmet that's got a Bet99 sticker on it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
there's a perfect example. And, we'll maybe wrap it up with this point here, but like, not to get back to the old tinfoil conspiracy theories, but right, there's a lot of people who theorize that, oh, Michael Jordan's adventures in baseball wasn't so much, oh, I'm tired with the game, it's a tribute to dad, blah blah blah. It was, yeah, gambling caught up to him, and rather than a massive suspension, we'll let you save face. And there have been entire books and docu-series made about that. But I think you would be naive to think that over the next couple of years, some prominent star in whatever sport it is isn't going to be caught in a similar way. And it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. Are they going to try and bury it and kind of continue to use the Jontay Porters of the world, where, if they just ban them from basketball, is anyone going to bat an eye that Jontay Porter's not in the NBA anymore? Probably not. Right. But Steph Curry, a LeBron, right? Someone who is kind of the face of their team, a significant player on a championship team that could actually derail an entire season. That's where the whole ethics of it will really shine through. And I would love to be an optimist and be like, no, they're going to stick to their moral code. But I think money talks, and you're probably going to see a lot of fringe scapegoats kind of get paraded out there to be made examples of. And some of the other stuff gets buried and dealt with behind closed doors.
Yeah, and I mean, last point for me, you've seen alcohol take down athletes,
Yeah.
even though there's strict rules against it, right? We've seen drugs take down athletes, even though there's strict rules against it. Again, there's a reason why gambling is the most addicting thing on the planet. People are not going to stop doing it just because you have rules in place. So we're going to see some people go down, even though they've got everything, right? Just because they need to feed their gambling addiction. So, yeah, we'll see where this goes. But yeah, interesting to see where Jontay Porter ends up in this whole thing.
And that brings us to our title sponsor of this episode, DraftKings.com.
Yeah. just a quick commercial break to talk about our sponsor. But I mean, there's also an event going on right now that is probably the most heavily gambled event in college sports, at least,
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about March Madness, of course, for the men's and women's. And I think a lot of people going into this were saying, on the men's side, the men's bracket, it's kind of a ho hum type thing. Like the standard teams are in it, but there's not really any star players anymore. But on the women's side, you've got these absolute superstars, brand makers that are, you know, kind of redefining what college basketball is on the female side, which is great to see. So
Mm-hmm.
that's actually been kind of the primary focus. But seeing as how we're a Canadian show, we're a Canadian podcast, we wanted to focus on two of the more prominent Canadians being represented down in the NCAA tournament, of course, with Aaliyah Edwards and Zach Edey. So, what are your thoughts on their tournaments so far?
Well, number one, great to see that both of them are still alive in the tournament. So both through
Yep.
to the Sweet 16. Obviously, Edie's with Purdue, and any Boilermakers fan will quickly point out the quick way that they can fizzle out. So I don't think, even though they've won 2 games, anyone in Purdue is getting ready to hang any banners quite yet. Still some work to be done there.
Yeah.
And obviously UConn's a really strange team in the sense that, you rewind 10 years and it was almost like when Tiger Woods was golfing, where you could bet Tiger Woods or the field when he played. You could essentially do those same bets of, is Gino and the Huskies going to win it all again? Or is someone
Yeah.
else going to just intersperse their run of 8 championships here? Right. So again, UConn is dealing with a rash of injuries. Azzy Fudd is out for the season. Her and Paige Bueckers, who were the 2 back-to-back #1 rated prospects in the country. I think they've played through all their years together at UConn, something like 16 total games, regular season or playoffs. It's just one's blown an ACL or the other
Yeah.
one. So they're a team in flux, but they are definitely still a very dangerous team out there, and they are looking really, really good in their first 2 games. And Aaliyah Edwards is obviously a huge part of that. So some of the discourse coming into this season was really around both Edwards and Edie. What are they going to do after the year? Right. And obviously, they would both love to go out cutting down some nets and go out on top of the mountain there. But there were questions about both of them. Right. And with
Mm-hmm.
Aaliyah, the real big one was on senior night, once Paige announced, like, hey, I am coming back for another year, even though she would be a top 5 WNBA pick, like lock at this point. So everyone then kind of looked to Aaliyah like, well, what are you going to do? And, Aaliyah Edwards, she's someone who is having a tremendous, tremendous season, and she has been growing year after year after year, and you can see it
Mm-hmm.
in her stats and becoming more and more comfortable in the role that she plays as well too. Like she's not some 6'8" behemoth under the basket. She's kind of an undersized, power forward,
Yeah.
center, small ball, and she really does get the most out of her frame. So the question was, are you going to run it back and see if you can win it all next year, or are you going to declare? And ultimately she declared. And I think that was a smart move on her part, and getting it out of the way with before the tournament started. Again, another pretty mature move, wise beyond her years there, because, when you've got a championship team, you want the focus to be on the next game, not, well, what's Aaliyah going to do? What's Aaliyah going to do after the
Yeah.
season? Right. And flip side of the coin with Edie, like he's been flirting with the NBA draft a couple of years now. He's put his name forward, taken it out, returned to school. Everyone kind of thought last year when they fizzled out in March Madness that was going to be the year that he declared. Ultimately doesn't, comes back and says, hey, I'm all in for this year. Let's go out there and finally hang a banner here. And he's again putting up the same stats that he always has, right? Like player of the year nominee. He's
Mm-hmm.
won, the Wooden Award. He's been an All-American. Like any collegiate basketball award you can name, he's won at some point in his career, right? But he's a really interesting one because coming into this year, people didn't even know, like, even though there's 2 rounds to the NBA draft, like, is anyone even going to draft him, or is he going to be kind of the undrafted free agent signing? Because even though he's 7'4" and does all the things that you want it to do on a basketball court, he does everything you want to do on a basketball court in kind of a 90s system, right? He's
Yeah.
not He's not quick. He can't shoot the three. Yeah, like all the bigs that are coming in now, the Chet Holmgrams, the Victor Wembanyama's of the world here, like they're do it all. So it's a new wave. So I'm really interested to see how both of them, who after the season, whether they win it all or not, I have to assume Edie's gonna declare and go into the NBA draft as well too. But his play is actually now rising his stock quite a bit to the point where he's kind of looked at as a late first rounder, second round draft pick, whereas before the talk was, well, does he even hear his name selected? So I'm really interested to see how both of them kind of adapt to going pro because neither of their skill sets jump off the page as like plug and play day one starter. They're going to have to kind of be projects, but I think that both of them have shown their work ethic over the years that they can get there. It's just, are they going to land in the right circumstance? And is the team going to be patient enough with them to fully see that development happen?
Yeah. And I think for both of them, the really unique thing about where they're at right now is they're both the driving factor behind their team's success.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really puts a lot of eyeballs on them right now, which is why they're getting a lot of positive publicity. With Aaliyah, you just mentioned, the rest of the team, they've kind of been injured, not really playing all that well. There's kind of been the one constant that they've had
Yeah.
over the last year and a half, 2 years has been Aaliyah Edwards. And that's probably the most underrated thing that you can look at from a professional level is, are you available
Mm-hmm.
to play? Because
The
one
best
thing is
ability
being
is availability.
exactly 100%. And the fact that she's been able to improve and improve and improve and really become kind of that unsung hero of that UConn team, because obviously Paige gets all the publicity as the
Yeah.
face because she's a phenomenal basketball player, the big personality. That's exactly what you want. You want to build around a player like that. But you need the Aaliyah Edwards to win games, to win championships. Like you need that. And, you know, I think that this is, again, like you mentioned, a perfect time for her to put her name forward in the draft because one, she can now just go out and play, free and clear of having any pressure. She
Mm-hmm.
knows that she's going in the draft already. Doesn't have to worry about whether it's going to be, if I play bad, I'm going to go back or whatever it is. And I think that's kind of a nice feeling for her because she's actually taking her game up a level because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the way the WNBA is going, because like I mentioned, there's a lot of star power in college basketball, which is going to be transferring over to the professional level very soon. I saw something the other day where the WNBA is actually looking to break away from the NBA television deal that they're kind of assigned to,
Yeah.
and they're looking to negotiate their own, which is actually pretty lucrative if you look at the fine print of it. So I think that this is a pretty exciting time for the growth of the WNBA and women's basketball overall. And the fact that you've got a prominent Canadian player like Aaliyah Edwards, who's kind of in the mix of being, she's going to be a top 10 pick. I think that's pretty safe to assume in the WNBA draft. Could she sneak into that top five now? You know?
In any other draft year, I'd say, there's a chance, right?
Yeah.
But you look at the names that are coming, like Caitlin Clark, Indiana has all but they've pretty much just taken her silhouette and been like,
Yeah.
who's going to be number one, right?
They
Like,
they've already sold out their season tickets for next year.
oh, I know. I know. But when you get a pick and roll combo of Clark and Boston up there,
Yeah.
like they're gonna go from, it's been some lean years for Indiana
Yeah.
over the last couple of seasons, but they're gonna be one of the most they're gonna be must watch TV every single night. So,
Yeah.
but you've got some other really, really talented players that could be coming out, and some of them we're still waiting on. Do they declare? Do they go back? Right? Because for those that don't know, it's different in the WNBA than it is in the NBA, where right now it's you can one and done for the NBA, right? Go and do your collegiate season, or you go play pro somewhere, and then you're essentially eligible. Which they're even talking about bringing back the straight out of high school at some point, but that's a future CBA discussion that Mr. Silver can have there. Whereas
Yeah.
the WNBA, they actually need to have a certain number of years of school to be eligible, right? And you need to be, I think, minimum 22 years old, and
Yeah.
then in your fourth year. So there's a few more hoops to jump through. So it's not like everyone who's watching maybe the women's tournament this year, and it's like, oh my God, Juju Watkins, like, could she, be a top 3 pick? Not eligible quite yet, right?
Yeah,
She
she
probably
could.
will be, but a few years from now, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, like, but that's kind of the interesting part of looking to project where Leah Edwards is going to be, because is she going to keep improving? And if that's the case, then hey, I'm a team in the top 5. I'm looking at a player like that who's kind of like a grit and grind, hustle type of player. There aren't a lot of those types of players in basketball right now.
No.
So the more and more you can get those types of personalities in your locker room, the better. Now going over to Zach Edey, I mean, you look at the most important player to a team in the NCAA,
Yeah.
and it's a poster of Zach Edey.
Might be the
Purdue is
most
not,
decorated collegiate
yeah,
Canadian basketball player ever when it's all said and done.
100%. But I'm just saying, like, without Zach Edey, you could pretty much chalk up Purdue to be, what, 15 and 17,
Yeah.
on the year, and not even tournament eligible. So you look at the impact that he has on his team. There's no one more important to the success of their franchise. And you look at the numbers that he's putting up in the first couple of games of the tournament. There's only one other player who's done what he's doing in the history of the NCAA tournament. You know who that is?
Not off the top of my head. Who do you got?
A certain Mr. Shaquille O'Neal. So
Big
when
Shaq
you look
Diesel.
at Big Shaq Diesel, and actually Shaq came out and said he's going to rename him Zakil.
There you go.
But yeah, like, so you look at the dominance that he's kind of brought to the table, and I mean, I mentioned, coming into this topic, there isn't a lot of star power on the men's side. Zach Edey's probably as close to the biggest star on the men's side as you're going to get. So, I personally think that one, he's moved his way into a for sure locked and loaded top 20 pick in the NBA draft. No questions asked. If you look at last year, 100% what you're saying, he's the non-traditional center now. You look at, if he comes up in the 80s, he's a first overall pick every year.
Yeah.
But with the way that things have gone in transition, yeah, he doesn't really fit the traditional mold. But I think the reason why he came back was to work on some of those things that people were saying were an issue for him. His speed, his footwork, his ability to get back in transition. I don't see him out of place whenever he's getting back on defense. I see him as being one of the first people down the floor when they're transitioning on offense. So I think with the way that he's kind of molded his game to better himself, that looks so good on his resume going into the NBA draft, because now he's got the the hardware to go with it. Hopefully he can leave with an NCAA championship now, but he also went back and worked on his flaws, which a lot of people aren't willing to do. So I think that if he continues his run of dominance in this NCAA tournament, he could really be knocking on that door of, hey, maybe there's going to be a team that's bold enough to take him in the top 10 and use him to the best of his skill set, because there aren't a lot of people like him anymore. Yeah. So that's the interesting part about it. But yeah, good on both of them for, representing their teams as well as their countries, because these two are the future of Canadian basketball.
Yeah,
right.
I blame Hashim Thabit for scaring all of these NBA teams away from kind of that traditional center. But I mean, to your point there, right? Like he really has gone back and improved some of the facets of his game there, and I think teams aren't really worried about him defensively. It's more so when you do have these bigs that can stretch the floor, when he starts getting pulled away from the basket, that's where you start seeing the warts start to happen, right? So he needs to work on to succeed at the next level, whether it's a jumper, whether it, if he can stretch out to a 3 to not be like a legitimate threat. Like no one's expecting him to go and shoot 40% from beyond the arc here. But in the modern NBA, like everyone on the court needs to be able to, when called upon, if you're wide open, pull the trigger there. So even if he's only taken, 1.5 threes per night type thing over the course of a season, he needs to be comfortable enough to do that. And maybe whether it's some baby Kareem skyhook or something other than a dunk and a layup is kind of the scouting package on him right now, where Around the rim, soft hands, great, no concerns. If a team packs the paint, if the Raptors build the wall like they did against Giannis when they won the championship there and just jam everyone into the paint there, what do you have to fall back on, right?
Yeah.
So if he's able to really showcase that, and I think he's probably going to be one that actually benefits from going to some of those NBA kind of pre-draft workouts so that scouts can see up close and personal, because like you were saying, him having the self-awareness of I need to work on this and this. He's a well-spoken guy, smart individual. I think he might rise his stock a little bit just based on conversations
Yeah.
that he has, rather than people have an image of this kind of slow plodding 7'4", and then they see him in person and like, oh, smart, intelligent, willing to learn, picks things up quickly. That's where you can maybe see one of those teams start to reach. But going to be interesting to see where both of them land. But before we move on, there's more men and women that I quickly wanted to shout out that are still alive in March Madness. So we already said that there was a record number 21-21 this year as far as men and women split. Still alive on the men's side. Obviously, you've got Edey with Purdue, Emmanuel Sharp with Houston, Quincy Guerrier with Illinois. Go figure. An Illinois recruiting Canadian, eh? Weird. And then Ryan Nemhard, Gonzaga, Ryan Young with Duke on the women's side, obviously Aaliyah Edwards, Brianna McLeod of Colorado, Emma Kaobel with Duke. You knew it had to happen at least once.
There's going to be one. There's always going to be
just
one.
Giving them their props. Ivani Jim with Gonzaga, Cassandra Prosper, Notre Dame, actually played in Ottawa here. Shout out to Capital Courts Academy for helping to develop her. And then Roxanne McCullough of USC. So round of applause to all of our Sweet 16 participants, Canadians that are still alive there.
Let's go. Oh, Canada. Last thing that I was kind of thinking of as you were talking about with Edey, I think if you were to, get in his ear a little bit and say there's two players in NBA history that you go and look at how they evolved their games, they really carved out a niche for themselves because they were big. They weren't as fast as the rest of their competition, but they made it work. One is Arvydas Sabonis, the former Portland Trailblazers center. And then, more recent one, former Raptor, Marc Gasol.
I thought you were going to say, and more recently, Domantas Sabonis.
No, but Marc Gasol. I think that those two fit the profile of what Zach Edey brings to the table, right? Good footwork interior, but needs to work a little bit on the lateral movement, back and forth, kind of stretching on his game. But you look at Gasol and Sabonis, they both developed that long-range jump shot, right? And like you're saying, I think that's kind of the next step for him. If he can develop even, like you were saying, 1, 2, 3 shots from 20 feet and beyond every game, that just makes him that much more lethal. So, anyways,
I don't think anyone has any illusions that he's going to be picking up the opposing point guard 100 feet away from his basket. But like you say, I think the Marc Gasol one is a really apt point there too, because you look at him early on in his career, battled with weight a little bit, was noticeably behind the play quite often. When he was with Memphis there, it really took him kind of rededicating himself even at the professional level. He'd already made it, and it took some overhauling of his shot selection and even just, physique as well too, before he became, a really serviceable, relied upon starter.
And then defensive player of the year eventually.
Yep. There you go.
But moving on to another sport, we found a hockey topic that we wanted to discuss tonight, and a little bit more on the cool factor than of the impactful factor. So maybe I'll let you kind of walk us into the topic, and we can go on from there.
Yeah, well, for those that are fans of the original 6 franchise, I think Arizona is, or maybe
if it were up to you and Gary Bettman, you'd have 3 franchises in Arizona.
Yeah, they would all be based out of the desert if we're up to Bettman. But no, long time Coyotes captain Shane Doan is going to be a very proud papa. We're recording this on Tuesday night here. So I believe puck drop may have already happened. Josh Doan is making his NHL debut against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, you might be saying, well, why are we talking about Josh Doan? He's technically American. Like, he's about as Arizona as it gets. So he was
Yeah.
born in Scottsdale, and then he played in, Phoenix with their junior hockey system, and then he got drafted by the Coyotes, and he played for their Tucson Roadrunners. So like there's no more desert hockey like this is Gary Bettman's poster child right now,
Yeah.
that he wants Josh Doan to go out there and score a hat trick tonight, essentially, is what he's pulling for. But a
Yeah.
very cool factor, because there are just so few father son duos that do get to play the same sport professionally, and anytime it does happen, it's obviously a very cool thing. And anyone who's kind of thinking like, wow, they picked Josh Doan, who's probably like a 7th round pick, like, no, it was a 2nd round selection. He was leading the AHL team in points at the call up, so he definitely earned it based on merit and his play. This isn't a nepotism thing. Shane Doan's working for the Maple Leafs right now, so he
Yeah.
had absolutely zero say in that one getting called up. But methinks he's probably on a plane to check out his son right now. But very, very cool moment, and kind of a full circle thing to bring back, of thinking of some of the great father-son duos that have played in the NHL, and a lot of them, go figure, have been Canadian over the years. So
Yeah.
just gonna rattle off a few here for you, and we'll see. We'll have you power rank them. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion that the first ones that I'll bring up here, because they're from your hometown, are going to be pretty high on your list. But obviously, you've got the Felinos, so you've got Mike and
Hmm.
then Nick and Marcus. Both ended up playing in the NHL there. Some good old Sudbury boys.
And
Uh,
a little fun fact about that too. So both of them represented their respective countries internationally, but Marcus represented Canada, Nick represented the U.S.
uh,
So
well, we're
go
gonna have to
figure.
have a little chat with Nick, I think. There, get him on the show and give him a dressing down.
Yeah, we'll have to ask him about that. But no, I think that I think them spending the majority of their, you know, adolescence in the States would, pretty much warrant them to be a, an American citizen by then.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
anyways.
What technicalities? You got the Parise, so JP, obviously the
Yeah.
father there, and then Zach Parise, also
JP
making.
Parise, also a alumna of the 1980 Miracle on Ice team.
Yeah, yeah. He's just making it. What a great movie he was in. If only it was based on some sort of reality, eh?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
The Stastnys, so Peter, the father there, and then the sons, Jan and Paul Stastny, making
Hmm.
their debuts in the NHL. How could we forget the Hows, right? So you've got
Yeah.
Gordy, Mark, Marty, all of them actually getting
Oh,
to play
Marty.
together as well too.
Yeah. I was
And
gonna say
then
Marty was unfortunately the Brent Gretzky of that family.
yeah. And then probably the most famous father-son duo in terms of goal scoring prowess, obviously Bobby and Brett Hull there as well too. So those are just some of the ones that I had made note of. There have obviously been more over the years, but who
Yeah.
in the pantheon of like good father-son duos, like even looking locally here, you got Brady Kachuk and Keith Kachuk. Like
Yeah.
there's a whole bunch more that you can kind of point to. Like who kind of sticks out as the quintessential father son duo, regardless of any sport? There, when you think of professional ranks.
Well, I mean, we could stick with hockey here because I mean, I think the Hows are, the predominant one, right? Because, like you had mentioned, the fact that he got to play with both of his sons, I think, was the most impactful thing. You look at, Ken Griffey Sr., Ken Griffey Jr., same type of deal, right? They got to play the same outfield. Ken Griffey Jr. is stealing the fly ball from his dad, and his dad grounding him in the dugout because he's still 19 years old. The um, you, and then again, you mentioned some of them, but one of them I actually wanted to talk about that's not at that point yet, but it's going to be very, very, impactful over the next, I want to say 5 years, because there's going to be three of them, is the Aginla family.
Yeah,
And you look at what Jerome did over the course of his career, obviously going to be a Hall of Famer. And then you look at his kids. I mean, his kids are just absolutely dominant at every level that they are playing at right now.
yeah,
So he's got two sons and a daughter. all three of which are just stellar, top-notch players. So I think with obviously the involvement of the PWHL by the time that she's going to be available to go play, I mean, I think you're going to see the Aginlas, kind of rewriting the record books in regards to father-children combos. And then another one that uh, I mean, it's kind of off sport because the dad played football and all of his kids play different sports. So I'm talking about the Nurse family.
Mm.
Papa Nurse, CFLer, played for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Darnell Nurse, obviously, prominent defenseman for the Edmonton Oilers. And then we've got the two daughters, and we've got a very prominent basketball player with Kia, and we've got Sarah, who's one of the best defensemen in women's hockey. So
Mm-hmm.
I think when you look at that type of dynamic, that's a pretty athletic family, and probably not going to be able to achieve more than what that group has, especially given the different dynamic that they have.
Yeah, no, it's so true too, right? And you raise an interesting point there when you're saying like, father son duos in hockey. Like, again, those might be, and maybe there is someone out there who can be like, no, good old Marty Smith back in 1960 had a daughter that's in the PWHL now, but like nothing jumps to mind. So apologies if I'm overlooking someone here, but like that could be kind of the first NHL PWHL kind of father-daughter duo that we're going to be talking about there as well too, right? So
Yeah,
you get some of these families that when you get a high performing athlete dad and a track star mom or something like that, they tend to have some good genetics getting passed along to the kids there. And it's
yeah,
not all that uncommon when you get to an Olympic medalist for a mom and dad played pro sports. Odds are the kids are probably going to go pro in something there. So
yeah,
I think the one that kind of sticks out to me out of the ones that I was rattling off there would be the Hulls, right? Because it's one thing when you have a father son duo. It's another thing when it's Hall of Fame, like all time great scoring list father son duos there, right? Now,
and and the son doing it despite his dad
yeah.
because I don't know if people know the history of those two, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think the St. Louis victory parade, people got a little bit of insights into what their personalities off the ice are really like there. But we'll save that topic for another night. Let's just say
yeah,
that they've got a few warts in that family
yeah,
there.
just a few.
Yeah, some rough edges that need to get softened. But in terms of their actual careers, right? Like that's the one that really sticks out to me because it's unbelievable for A, you to both go professional, but B, for you guys to both have the goal scoring prowess that they did there. And, I think probably combined, I would have to look up their stats there, but it has to be over 1,000 goals between the two of them there. Like,
Oh no, for sure it is because I think just with Brett, um,
he was what,
he would have gotten
700
them.
or something?
Yeah, he would have gotten them close enough to 1,000 where I think Bobby could have had a decent career and they still would have cracked 1,000 mark.
Yeah. So it's always cool to kind of see those things happen. And obviously circling back to our friend Josh there, uh, kudos to him. He's worked his way up there.
Yeah,
People actually did kind of question the pick, not that he got drafted, but second round, was it a reach? Okay, well, they just really wanted another Doan in the system. And you know what? We crap on Arizona a lot on this show. A lot of it is justly deserved. But this is, this is a feel good story here. And you know what? Golf clap to the Doan family because this is a pretty special moment for them getting to see Josh make his NHL debut in the same jersey that dad wore.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, obviously, we brought it up because Shane Doan is obviously a very prominent member of the Canadian hockey world and represented Canada on numerous occasions at the World Championships. Obviously, with Phoenix/Arizona's lack of playoff success, so he was available along with Ryan Smith to kind of lead the charge for Team
Yeah.
Canada there. But yeah, I mean, it's so great, especially because you're seeing like some of the old Winnipeg Jets guys, right? Like Kachuk having his two kids now, being both being a part of Canadian teams at one time, and obviously with Shane, one of the last Winnipeg Jets to play in the NHL, now having his son go through kind of the same process that he went. I mean, anytime you see that, it's great, and yeah, sometimes you make the pick based on potential because hey, genetics, as we've discussed they're pretty good when it comes to long-term success athletically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I'm going to throw this at you here. I didn't prepare you for it, but just giving me your knee-jerk reaction. We're not going to say the name of the individual, but if anyone logged into Twitter today, one specific person went on a giant rant about Zach Hyman scoring 50 goals and him essentially just being the product of having the good fortune of having rich parents who bought a hockey league to give him lots of ice time, and then he goes pro and he was on Austin Matthews line and now he's playing with Connor McDavid, and yeah, he might work hard but he was born on third base and blah 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 blah. I have never seen, first of all, hockey Twitter is a pretty toxic place for those that have ever stepped foot into there. It's usually my
I
team
think
good, your team
Twitter
bad.
in general is a pretty pretty toxic place.
Yeah. But I have never seen fan bases across the league galvanize against one individual quite like this here. But I wanted to get just your thoughts on I guess it all kind his thing that he's trying to get across in a very inelegant way was the old nature versus nurture and opportunities here, and had someone who had that same work ethic, had Zach Hyman been born to a family living off of food stamps, would he have been the 50 goal scorer and even made the NHL and all of that? So you can kind of see where he's coming from, but at the same time too, way to take a feel good story of a 31-year-old kind of journeyman player really breaking out. And all right, you know what this parade needs? A little rain here. So, what are your thoughts on the great Hyman debate of 2024 here?
Well, I won't ask you now, but you're gonna have to tell me who it was. I don't go on Twitter, so you're gonna have to tell me who it was who posted that afterwards. But yeah, I hear that a lot, and obviously, like you being involved in amateur sport as much as you are, I was involved in amateur sport a lot in the coaching realm. You see a lot of privilege, happen more than it should. Now, in the case of a Zach Hyman, I look at the career trajectory that he went on, and early on in his amateur career, did he get more opportunities than the average kid? Probably. What did he do with them?
Yeah.
Obviously he didn't rest on the fact that, oh well, he came from a well-to-do family, he came from a situation that set him up for an advantageous position. you know you have to still work hard,
Mhm.
because that's the biggest misconception that a lot of people don't see, is that just because you have things given to you, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
Someone could give you $1,000 right now. Are you going to go invest it, or are you going to go spend it on something you don't need?
Hey, sweet, $1,000. Let's
Yeah,
go buy some tickets to the boat sale.
yeah, exactly. um, but that's the biggest thing that I think a lot of people look at, and it's more of from an envious position
Yeah.
than anything. And did I ever play with people who I felt were getting, better treatment, um, more accessibility to the things that I thought I would need to be successful? Sure, but did it stop me from working hard to get to where I got to? Absolutely not. Maybe work harder.
Mhm.
And then I also saw a lot of athletes, whether I was playing, coaching, whatever, who were given these opportunities. And you know what? They said, I'm going to be the best version of this player that I can be, because I don't want to let those people down who gave me what I needed to get to that point. So Zach Hyman didn't make the NHL because of who his parents were.
Mhm.
Zach Hyman didn't break out with the Toronto Maple Leafs because of who his parents were. Do you think that NHL coaches give a shit who your parents are? when they're putting together a lineup to save their job? Absolutely not. So the fact that he's playing with Austin Matthews, guess what, everybody? It's because he works freaking hard and he gets opportunities for Austin Matthews to score goals because that's what Austin Matthews is good at.
Mm-hmm.
When he goes to a team like Edmonton, it's a different dynamic. Look at where every single one of Zach Hyman's goals are scored.
Yeah.
It's within 6 to 7 feet of the net.
Yep.
The biggest thing that Edmonton lacked was someone to get their nose dirty and really get into those areas to put the puck in the net. Draisaitl's great at what he does. He's kind of like a left-handed Ovechkin, great with one-timers, positioning. He understands the spacing on the ice. I don't have to get into how Connor McDavid scores because that guy is just, the best hockey player on the planet. Zach Hyman has a role. Zach Hyman knows what he's good at. The fact that he's playing with these guys, it's bringing out the best in McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, everybody on that team. So I think the debate ends there because if you look at the contract that he got by Edmonton, people would say, oh, well, that's a lot of money. Do you think that he's outperformed that contract so far?
I think
I
they're
do.
laughing all their way to the bank right now.
Absolutely. That's an absolute steal for what they're paying him. He's making less than Evander Kane.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so anybody who is posting these things, one, you need to reevaluate who you're going after because you don't score 50 goals in the NHL because of circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
How many times did Gretzky's line mates score 50 goals?
You're the Oilers fan here. I thought you were going to spit all those knowledge.
Yeah, not as much as he did. So, I mean, that's the part that really doesn't make sense to me. And again, whoever posted it is obviously coming from a place of, well, if I were to get that opportunity, well, guess what? If you were to get that opportunity, you probably wouldn't do half the things that Zach Hyman's doing.
Yeah.
So I'm in full support of giving Zach Hyman his flowers because not only has he made the best of the situation that he's been put in, but he's maximized the amount of talent around him, which is very hard to do. So,
yeah,
golf clap for Zach Hyman.
Golf clap to Zach Hyman there, absolutely. And I was trying to paint the picture as neutrally as possible, so I didn't influence your decision. But it's pretty obvious where the vast majority of rational people will fall on that spectrum. Because if you want to say like, well, first of all, hockey is a privileged sport, right? Like it is astronomical costs to participate in. So there's not a lot of, participating families who I would consider lower scale, truly poor, like don't know where my next paycheck is coming from, right? They just can't afford to get in there. So number one, he comes from a rich family. Well, let's survey the whole league here and, see their parents' tax returns. Adventure a guess that
yeah.
we're doing all right.
Yeah.
But the second part here is you can try and make the argument that he was handed everything and all these extra opportunities that other people didn't get. And that's why he is where he is right now. I could probably at like a 5-to-1 ratio point out people who didn't make it to where they should have, who were afforded all those privileges because it was given to them, because they knew that because they knew that if you know what, I screw up, daddy'll clean it up. Mommy'll write a check. Right? Whatever. I'll just keep going. I don't need to do all the little things and grind and go to the dirty areas of the ice. Like Zach Hyman makes his bones in front of the net there, doing all the tough goals.
That is, and that is not for the faint of heart. For anyone who's played hockey, I can speak from experience. And again, I haven't played hockey in a long, long time, but after you spend, the majority of your game in front of the opposing net, the backs of your legs don't feel good.
No.
Your back doesn't feel good. Yeah, your lower back feels awful.
Yeah.
And hey, are you gonna get a puck in the neck? Are you gonna get, a cross check to the side of the head? Absolutely. So, I mean, to your point, all due respect for Zach Hyman, because not a lot of people are willing to do those types of things in today's NHL.
Yeah. And I think that's the point that this individual who, again, we're not going to name him here. He's already getting dragged through the mud, and, you know, rightly so for his less than, stellar take on that matter right there.
It's less
But
than subjective take.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, and last thing for me, because I actually just found out about this, is he messaged me right before we logged on. Obviously, good friend and good friend of the show, Henry Burris, just announced where he's going to be coaching this coming year. So he's going to be the co-offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for Florida A&M down in the
Hey,
NCAA. So let's get a golf clap for Hank. Congrats, buddy.
friend
Um,
of the
they're
show,
going to do
Hank. There we
yeah,
go.
they're going to do
Forget Grey Cup
fantastic down there.
champion and all those accolades. Friend of the show is how you need to lead that
Exactly,
intro
friend of
there.
the show.
Uh,
But yeah, exactly where he needs to be, coaching quarterbacks, working with young quarterbacks, and calling an offense. I mean, that's where he's going to make his bread and butter. So, yeah, good opportunity for him, and obviously with his young lad, going and playing in the NCAA next year, should be a fun fall in the Burris household for sure.
yeah, you want to talk about father-son duos? There you go. There's another one
There you
right
go,
there. What
Henry and Armand. There you go.
what a way to tie in a perfect wrap up to the episode there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you kind of you get a feel for it when you do it long enough, right? The segues work, how to transition and whatnot. And I think you and I have gotten pretty good at that. So
And if we
now,
can
now that
just
we're at
get those paper bags over our heads, that's when we'll really have something there.
exactly, we'll get the paper bags if you subscribe. If we get to 1,000, the next show we'll have paper bags on our faces. Okay.